On this episode of Locked On Lightning, the Lightning lose big up in New York. We talk about all that and more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I just want to remind you that today's episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So I just came back from the Garden, watching that. I have very mixed feelings about this game, but the one thing I can say that the Lightning, they looked very different in certain aspects of their game than they did from the last four previous games, especially these last three wins that they had. And I'm not going to say that I predicted this. I'm not going to say that I saw this coming, and I'm not going to say that this is the reason why. But when I showed up to the Garden tonight up in New York, and the Lightning were practicing. Now, we don't really see on television all too often teams warming up. And, correct me if I'm wrong, in the comments below, whether it's on YouTube or tweet to us on the show or just DM me on Twitter. It just felt like the vibe I was getting from the Lightning during warmups. I didn't really see any intensity. There was little short spurts of shooting here and skating there, but it just didn't seem like they were doing anything constructive towards what you would call getting ready for a big game, a game in which, you're playing against another team that is going to be in the playoffs, another team that is very good, another team that is going to have a very good chance at playing in the Stanley Cup final. And I just didn't. The vibe I was getting from Tampa was just, relaxed, which can be in certain instances good. It could be constructive. It could be beneficial to the team. Playoff atmosphere up at MSG, rubber match for these two teams. And, sometimes that works. You don't want to make too much out of it. But I just got a bad vibe from this team. And I'm sure if there was any of you fans that are listening to this pod or watching us on YouTube, and you were there in attendance, let me know what was your beginning of the game or pregame vibe, because I think that what followed afterwards in the game was somewhat telling, and we could trace some of that back to how the Lightning were pregame. I mean, Vasilevskiy, and the only reason I'm pointing this out is because I noticed it, and it's not something, I don't think anybody's really going into pregame warmups looking how a team is and all that stuff. But from my best recollection, I don't think Vasilevskiy really took that many shots in warmups. I don't know, man. I just feel like, like I said, I'm not going to predict. I'm not saying that that's the reason why, but you go into this game, you're not really doing much of anything in warmups, which is fine. I mean, once the puck drops, the intensity goes on. And you didn't really see that. I mean, you saw the intensity here and there, but it was in the wrong times of the game. The Lightning had 4 fights in this game, 2 of which were from Corey Perry, one of which from Ross Colton, who got himself thrown out of this game, which was just we'll talk about all that in the second half of this episode, because I admire the enthusiasm from this Lightning team, but I didn't really see any game plan out there from this team. I didn't really see any trend from them in terms of what they were trying to do, other than just trying to furiously get into the zone and just do something in response to what the Rangers were doing. Now, having said that, I am going to be completely realistic and honest and say that the Rangers played a hell of a game tonight. Igor Shesterkin was phenomenal. The Rangers were just pretty much put a stranglehold on what the Lightning were trying to do. Whenever a puck handler came down the net, whether it be on the sides, on the wings, or down the middle, the Rangers were there. They were super, Johnny on the spot in terms of just trying to control things early on. And the Lightning had no answer to that. And I get it. And a listener tweeted out to me tonight about it when I was just getting a feel for how everybody else out there, was feeling, whether they were watching this game from home or watching this game on television or watching this game in the arena itself. Listener reached out and said this game is meaningless, which is, yeah, absolutely. The Lightning are in the playoffs. But at the same time, like I've said on previous episodes, that as much as the Lightning we're happy that the Lightning have solidified their place in the playoffs. The matchup is predetermined, pretty much has been predetermined since I think probably January. Let's be honest here, maybe even sooner than that. I think that to a certain extent we could agree that all these games mean something. That at the end of the day, when you look at these games now, obviously we're not going to get what we saw from Vasilevskiy or this Lightning team in general in that Islanders game. We're not going to see, we ideally would like to see some sort of mixture of what we saw this team do in their last four, especially that loss in Boston, because, I think, that's a one game where, yeah, Boston comes out on top, but, best of seven, Lightning have a chance. And I feel that way. Well, I felt that way about this game tonight. And I just saw not a complete different game, but I didn't see that playoff feel from Tampa Bay. I saw a team that was at most times just struggling to do the basics, just didn't have a game plan. Like I said, it just seemed like that there was just no aim. It was just like throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. And yeah, it resulted in 3 goals, and that's phenomenal. But at the end of the day, that's not a long-term successful plan to have, especially against a team who is rolling like the New York Rangers. I believe their record was something like 7-2-1, or I'm sorry, 7-3-1 in their or whatever, 7-2-1, yeah, in their last 10. And I always say, or I always stress, actually, what were those wins against? What were those close losses against? And for the most part, it was pretty much identical somewhat to what the Lightning have faced in their last 10 as well. And at certain times, probably 85% of this game, we didn't see that close of a game. I tweeted it going into the third period saying that really, this is a 1-goal deficit, but the Rangers have a very good firm grasp on this game, and a firm grasp did they have as they scored 2 more in the third period to pretty much put this game away. I think when they made it 5-3, the game was pretty much all but over. And I mean, looking at what the Lightning could have done, or what the positives that we could take from this game, or, some of the things I could say that, well, this happened and this is why the Lightning lost. And other than just not being able to control the puck, even though they did win a majority of the faceoffs in this game, the problem was that they didn't play well whatsoever in front of Vasilevskiy. They, at times, weren't able to just clear the zone and give him a breather. The Rangers also on the other side of that did a very good job of keeping the puck inside the zone and making the Lightning stay on the ice even longer. And that coupled with just a slew of just boneheaded, stupid penalties by the Tampa Bay Lightning, which, like I said, we will get into the second period, because I'm not saying that this is a long-term issue. This isn't an issue that even really the Lightning have had at all this entire season. Really what it comes down to is that it goes back to two things. Really not having any slice of a game plan. Clearly, even though if they did have some sort of plan going into this game, clearly that went out the window as soon as the opening puck dropped. But the other part of that is just the Lightning fourth line is just very vulnerable right now. And it's going to be something where I'm sure is going to be a topic of conversation throughout the series with Toronto. So we'll talk about that in the second half of this show, because that was really eye-opening to me. I think that it was very eye-opening to a lot of Lightning fans. It was all over social media, all these fights and all that. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about our first sponsor of the day, and that is our friends at Indeed. In case you have been living under a rock for pretty much the duration of the last 3, 4, 5 years, Indeed has been around forever. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you could do it all with Indeed. Now, a lot of people are starting to start businesses of their own, and we all know the job market is an absolute disaster. Everybody's unsure. They have all these job postings on other sites, but no one's hiring. And I think it's because, there's all that fluff out there. There's all these people. It's all just a mess hiring. But Indeed has it down stat. I mean, they're fantastic. You don't have to keep waiting. Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume or resume, I like to use both terms, on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. So, you got to go with Indeed. I mean, pretty soon, the Lightning will have to use Indeed to look for some more fourth liners forward. So, maybe they'll have to jump into that. So now all you have to do is visit Indeed.com/lockedon. Start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application. Pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So let's talk finally, because this has been on my mind since the first period, pretty much, of this game. I mean, I'm going to be honest with everybody. I think the first period of this game was very telling. I think that the Lightning, don't get me wrong, they scored 3 goals in this game against a very good Rangers team. A very good Rangers team that is very solid defensively from top to bottom. A very good Rangers team that has a goaltender in Igor Shesterkin, who I think is, when his team is playing as well as the Rangers did in front of him tonight, is the Igor Shesterkin that won the Vezina Trophy last year. On the other side of that, though, I will also say, before I get into the bad stuff, Andrei Vasilevskiy, he gave up 6 goals tonight. I think he played a phenomenal game, all things considered. I think that at the end of the day, other than Tyler Mott's second goal of the game, I think that Andrei Vasilevskiy did everything he could to keep this game somewhat close until the third period. And as we all know, with hockey games, when your team doesn't have it, as like the Lightning did tonight, they just don't have it. And at that point, when I'm not saying that this team quit tonight on their goaltender, but when you could only hold up the wall against the wave for so long and it collapses, we're going to see that. And it was those goals, those 2 goals in the third period, which at the end of the day, it doesn't seem as bad. Like I said, this was a 1-goal deficit for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it was, in the grand scheme of things, if you're just looking at the scores box and not watching the game, a very winnable game. But at the same time, I think that these two teams were farther apart really at that point than the box score really was able to show. So a good game from Vasilevskiy. You know, this isn't on him. I think he gave up really one bad goal tonight. Other than that, it was just an absolute disaster in front of him tonight. And even great goaltenders, and even goaltenders that have been playing as well as he's played over his last 5 games, I think that, you know, we can't hang this on him. You know, it's not just one of those. It's very rare, I think, in today's NHL, especially with just the level of scoring that every team has. You know, it's not just 1 or 2 guys here or there. And even then, you know, all these guys here on these teams, on every team to a certain extent, could score and hurt you in certain ways. And that's what the Rangers did to the Lightning tonight. And really just it goes back to just the Lightning going out there and playing better and giving themselves and their goaltender a chance to win out there. So, you know, hopefully, you know what, if I'm John Cooper, I would throw Vasilevskiy right out there tomorrow night against the Islanders. I don't see a reason as to why not. If you throw him out there against the Islanders, sit him against the Senators, perfectly fine with me. Have Brian Elliott go out there one last time before the season, and then you play Vazzy against Toronto and Detroit and just call it a day and get ready for the playoffs. But now moving on to the not so good things tonight. There was 4 fights in this one for the Lightning, and as much as I admire the energy and what's the right word? I guess somewhat leadership, if you want to say that. When a team is struggling, as we all know, a teammate steps up, tries to start a ruckus to at least, you know, get you guys energized, try to go out there and get something started. We saw that from Patrick Maroon tonight. We saw it from Ross Colton, and we got it twice from Corey Perry. Patrick Maroon, I mean, really, there was, I guess it was the first Corey Perry fight where I guess really it was only the first Corey Perry fight where I was just like, okay, let's get something going. This is what they needed at this point in time. At the top of my head, I don't really know when Perry, the first Perry fight happened. I'm looking it up. So it was in the second period, 16-13 into the second period. He fought Trocheck, which, let me just take a minute to say that, you know, as much as we all know by now, and as well as Corey Perry knows his role by now in this team, is to be that fourth line guy when he's not scoring, to be that fourth line guy to go out there and you know, play physical and be that sandpaper guy. Corey Perry's not, I would prefer, and maybe this is just me, and comment below what you think. Corey Perry at this point in his career shouldn't be fighting, especially after the year that he had last year. He had a very good year. He has shown at certain points this season that he could still score. I don't feel comfortable in Corey Perry going out there and starting fights. And maybe that's just, you know, I don't mind him playing physical, playing in the corners, playing in front. That's one thing. But going out there and fighting guys like Trocheck, and I forgot who he fought at the end of the game or towards the end of the game. I know he got into a second one after the whistle blew, which I don't even know if you call that. Yes, it was against Ben Harper after the whistle blew, which, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Rough night for him. I mean, he got absolutely killed on both those fights, especially the first one against Trocheck. Trocheck annihilated him right in the chin with a shot, which was a shot that I think would put any of us in the hospital. And then that shot against Harper at the end, he got hit in the back of the head. It is what it is. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with the role that John Cooper has put Corey Perry into. Like I've said on countless episodes, especially after, you know, in the past month, I firmly believe that Corey Perry should be playing on the third line. And if you're going to play Jeannot on the fourth line, then you need to slide Perry up, because Perry, I still believe, still has some goals, some points left in him. If you're going to put any veteran that has that sandpaper mentality on the third line, it has to be Perry. Maroon on the third line makes zero sense to me, alongside Cirelli and Killorn. Cirelli also left this game in the second period, which I didn't even realize until I saw Twitter after the game. It was just that chaotic of a game. Guys were swarming all over the place. But it was really just, that was the only time tonight where I thought it was probably a good decision to go out there and start something with the Rangers. Maroon starting a fight at the end of the first period made zero sense to me. I don't get it. It was really just something where, why are you going to do that? Why are you going to? Not only did he get a fighting penalty, but you also get unsportsmanlike conduct. It was not needed. The Lightning were down at that point. Why are you going to start something? And, if you're going to start something, make sure that it's still even strength afterwards. Your team's going into intermission 3-1, playing like dog, fill in the blank, dog blank. And you're going to take a penalty that's going to put your team down. I believe he got 2 minutes for that, if I'm not mistaken. I don't understand it. And then towards the end of the game, Ross Colton fighting, I believe it was Brandon Schneider, who put the cleanest hit you'll ever see on Nick Paul. I don't understand anything about it. I mean, Ross Colton was not doing. I mean, that's an episode that we will drop tomorrow. We could talk about just like all the people who we needed to put wanted posters out for tonight, because this was just not a good performance. Not even that. Just not a good look for the Tampa Bay Lightning. In a game as intense as this. I mean, hopefully they show a little bit more of restraint against, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and especially in these upcoming games against, the Islanders and Ottawa and, the Maple Leafs, because I know stuff is about to pop off in that Toronto series. I mean, that Toronto game next week, because I'm sure they're going to try and get a gauge to where Tampa's at right now. But this was just a boneheaded mistake for Ross Colton. Clean hit. I don't know. I'm curious as to if he's going to speak to the media tonight after the game. If I had to guess, I'd probably say no. We'll probably hear something tomorrow. I would love to hear what Cooper says, but I don't understand what Ross Colton's doing. It's one thing if you don't score and you want to play physical, which is fine, perfectly fine with that. But he's going out there, he's starting a fight for no reason. It was, like I said, the cleanest hit that you could have asked for as an opposing fan, as an opposing player. It wasn't even a hit where a guy got shaken up and you got to go defend your dude, your teammate. No, this was just a shoulder to shoulder. Paul was just off balance. He lost his footing. He lost his edge on his skate, and he fell. And I don't know what it was. Colton just went off, pretty much attacked Brandon Schneider on the ice. And to me, we might hear, well, he was just trying to defend his teammate. That just shows me, in my opinion, and if you've been listening to the show for a long time, I am one of the biggest Ross Colton fans in the world. That was just a complete lack of just awareness and being able to keep your head cool in the heat of the moment. Not even the heat of the moment, just understanding when there's a time to do something and when there's a time not to. And that's why this makes that much more confusing to me about what was the thought process there. And then at that point, not only you don't even fight him, you just tackle him. I was at the game with my father tonight. I turned to him and said, that wasn't a fight. That was an assault. And I don't understand. I don't understand it. And really what he did is that he failed his team. He failed his teammates and really just put his team in a tough spot, because there was a tiny wince of momentum there because, like I said, this was a 1-goal deficit heading into the third period. And then now the Lightning are starting to kind of play themselves back into this game. And I'm not saying that Ross Colton was make or break for this team in terms of winning or losing, but you're down a forward. You get yourself kicked out of the game, it's pretty much over at that point. And yeah, just a very confusing night physically from this Tampa team. There's it kind of reminds me of the scene from almost from the other guys with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, where Mark Wahlberg turns to him and he says, "I'm going to play bad cop and you play good cop." And then Will Ferrell goes absolutely nuts. And he says, "Oh, I thought you said bad cop, bad cop." And it was, Corey Perry was at an 8 in terms of intensity, with that fight early on against Trocheck. Colton was at a 25 and it was just not needed. And it was somewhat of an embarrassing response. And I'm sure to a certain extent, who knows, like I said, maybe he'll come out tomorrow and say that he was just trying to defend his teammates. So we'll see. I mean, it was just a night of just mistakes, just a night of sloppy play, just a night of not executing, and just a night of just poor hockey from the Lightning side, which is, to a certain degree, you got to hang your hat on to the fact that being said, they scored 3 goals. As John Cooper says, if you hold the other team to 2 goals or less, you have a good chance of winning. And I firmly believe that if the Lightning played well in front of in front of Vasilevskiy, Andrei Vasilevskiy, I think we'd be talking possibly about a closer result, or possibly a win up in New York. So, we'll keep an eye on what the statements roll out tomorrow. I don't know at this point if the Lightning will practice before their game against the Islanders. I would expect there's going to be some voluntary skate in the morning, probably around 10 a.m. We'll be sure to put out an episode probably around noon covering that, because I definitely want to get more into the post-game comments, into kind of the mindset that not only John Cooper had, but some of the players had about post-game reflections on their game. So we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll wrap things up in just a little bit. But first, let's hear from our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, if you haven't heard, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and it is now the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the Sportsbook app, FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a bigger chance for a payout at same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel. So, wrapping things up on the show, just a very disappointing game. I think, just kind of touching back on my earlier comments in the episode, I think when I went into the arena tonight, before I sat down and the Lightning came out of the tunnel, I think I had more of a higher expectation about how this game was going to go. On the crossover episode I had with Locked On New York Rangers host John Chick, I said 3-1 Lightning, and I got the 3 goals right for the Lightning side, and I will stick by my comments. I think that the Lightning played better in front of Vasilevskiy. We get a different result, definitely a closer game. I don't know, just the way the Rangers were playing tonight and the way they have been playing over their last 10, I don't know if you hold them to 1 goal. Maybe I was being a little bit overly optimistic about, how well Vasilevskiy has been playing tonight. But I mean, over his last couple of games. But I mean, this Ranger game is good. This Ranger team is good, and the good thing about these losses and wins down the road against these playoff teams is that it kind of gives you a glimpse as to what the Lightning may have to run across if they do advance past Toronto, which I still firmly believe at this point in time that they can. It's going to be. I don't want to get cocky here, but I think that looking at a loss back against a team like the New York Rangers, because they're not a one and done team in terms of losing in the first round, but I think it will make, like I said, I'm not sounding cocky, but I think it will make that much more enjoyable if these two teams were to play each other and Lightning were to able to beat them. So let me know in the comments below, if you're following us, watching us on YouTube, what you think about tonight's loss. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't mean much. Lightning are in the playoffs. They're playing Toronto, but like I've said in previous episodes, they're just trying to get into playoff mode. Tonight was a little bit of a step back. I think at the end of the day, we could just chalk this up to the Lightning's just them getting the better of themselves. It's a little bit of a cliche, but they beat themselves tonight. And I think that, though, as long as they play better in front of their goaltender, I think that they're in pretty good shape. I think Vasilevskiy played very well tonight. Like I said, faced 37 shots, gave up 6 goals, but at the same time, in my book, he only made one mistake tonight. So let us know, like I said, if you're watching us on YouTube, what you think about this game in the comments below. And also, if you're following us on social media, please go ahead and reach out to the show. Let me know whether you want to reach out to me in my DMs, Danky Dank, DENKYD8NK, what you think about this loss, or wherever we are. Our social media page, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. Give me a follow, like I said, on Twitter. And if you haven't already done so, if you're following us, if you want to listen to us in audio form, we are available everywhere audio is distributed. And most importantly, we are free. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk more about this. Like I said, I will be discussing some of the post-game mood. It's the Lightning. The good thing is, though, the Lightning don't have to sit home or wait a night to think about this. They get to go back on the ice tomorrow in Long Island and face the New York Islanders. So we'll be previewing that as well. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.